you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion has gotta go. Yeah.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm Jen Peoples, and I'm your host for this episode, and with me today is Tracy Harris.
Hey.
It's Sunday, January 23rd, and this is the Atheist Experience, a live call-in TV show sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. The ACA hosts a number of events throughout the week. We have a weekly web radio show, The Nonprofits, which I believe Matt did do yesterday. We have a happy hour at the Dog and Duck Pub on Thursdays at 7 p.m., which we just had the coldest one on record.
I think so, yeah.
This past Thursday. We also host a lecture series on the first Sunday of every month. That's at the Austin History Museum. And of course, we have our regular Sunday activities, which starts with a brunch at Romeo's. Continues with the show today, and we'll wrap up tonight at El Arroyo for dinner. And we'll have that address up on the screen a little bit later. You can find out more information about our activities by going to our website, and that's at www.atheist-community.org. And so, take it away, Tracy.
Yeah, today we're talking a little bit about a couple of atheist misconceptions. This would be misconceptions applied to atheists, not misconceptions that they have.
Right.
And I wanted to look specifically at why are you angry at God and you're searching for God. And I wanted to use an analogy of a person who has a family member who is ill with a potentially dangerous and treatable illness, who decides to treat it only using an alternative medical method such as homeopathy. It doesn't have to be homeopathy, just fill in the blank for any non-standard alternative treatment. They go to a doctor who advises them not to go to a regular doctor, that all medically trained professionals are in the pocket of big pharmaceuticals, it's a conspiracy, and they should trust this doctor and his treatments, and he's going to help them. You try to talk to the family member, you try to convince them that this is treatable. It may not be 100% of a cure rate, but there is treatment for this that is effective and is demonstrated more effective than placebo, and that they should go and get the treatment that is demonstrated effective instead of putting their life on the line with something that's not been demonstrated to be effective in any sort of valid research way. But the person goes forward, they follow this doctor, and ultimately they die. After their death, because you are incensed at the death of your loved one at the hands of somebody who claimed to be a professional, who claimed to have knowledge that they were willing to follow, you then take up a blog, take up a YouTube channel, and you start telling this story. And you start saying, you know, this person went to this doctor, this is what happened to them, they went for these treatments, we tried to talk to them, there is an effective cure rate for this. They did not take advantage of that, ultimately they died, and I do blame this alternative treatment that is put forward that it does not work, it's not been demonstrated to be effective, here's the reality behind the research that is claimed for this, this is, you know, why it doesn't work, what's actually been shown to be demonstrated for it, which is nothing. And after you post that, you start hearing from people who say to you, I have the same story. I had a loved one that this happened to, or I was seeing this doctor and I almost died, and then I finally got to a hospital. I was taken to an ER where they finally treated me, and I found out that this really was helpful, and now I'm better. You get these stories from people saying, you know, this is a really bad thing and it does cause damage, and this same thing happened in my situation. You decide to put together an association to say we need to start telling people what's going on here. We need to make sure to get the word out. Maybe we should start printing some materials. We need to start looking at maybe doing something a little bit more for community outreach, educating people about the dangers of this. And as this movement grows, you're going to expect that more people who actually endorse this form of alternative treatment are going to hear about this, and they're going to react and they're going to object. Mm-hmm. Some of the complaints that you would expect to reasonably receive from somebody who would accept this would be just someone writing to tell you that you're wrong. Mm-hmm. You might get somebody who writes to tell you that you've just bought into that same big pharma conspiracy, and this medical science that you're touting is no better than this other stuff because all the research is jaded and biased because of how it's done, and that there is no real information, and that you're trusting the wrong people. And studies by, for these alternative treatments are not, you can't have them done, and there's things blocking it, and nobody wants you to know the truth. And so you might get letters like that, and you might get letters from people, you would expect to get letters from people saying, I went to a homeopath, or I went to this alternative treatment, and I got better, and I'm doing better now, and so I know that it works, and there's nothing you can say to convince me that this doesn't work, because I had this illness, I took this treatment, and now I'm better. And you can tell them that, sometimes people do, get better, have, a spontaneous, remission.
Remission, yeah.
But that person's going to believe, they're going to tell you about their story, and they're going to say that's why they believe, and that's a letter you would expect to get. And you might even, believe it or not, expect to get letters from people who actually agree with you that the alternative treatment doesn't work, but say a lot of people have a placebo effect from it. It has this helpful benefit to it, and so maybe you should just lay off a little bit and let people take comfort in the fact that they're being treated for this illness, even if they're not actually being treated. And sometimes these doctors work in conjunction with a real medical doctor, and so we should probably not be so down on this, and maybe just take it with a grain of salt that this sometimes helps people, and acknowledge that there's some help that comes and some good that comes of this. These are all the types of letters that you would expect to get if you were starting up that type of an educational foundation. What I would never expect that you would ever get would be a letter from somebody who says, I believe that you're against homeopathy because you believe it works, and you're angry about the fact that it works. I don't know why somebody would think that you would advocate to put out information that something doesn't work. Now, I get the big pharma conspiracy and how, like I said, somebody might say that you've bought into a lie and that you're wrong in believing that it doesn't work. But for somebody to write to you and say, you believe that it does work, but you're advocating against it, and you're not the big pharma company,
right?
You're not gaining from this. So you just simply are, I don't know, out to hurt people, I suppose. I don't know what your motive would be. But the idea that somebody would accuse me, who is not the doctor benefiting from the big pharma conspiracy, who is not the big pharma conspiracy benefiting from the big pharma conspiracy. I'm just a person whose relative died. I went to look at the research, and I couldn't find anything to show that this is real treatment. I'm trying to help people, and somebody's writing to tell me that I really believe that homeopathy works, but I'm just trashing it because?
Yes.
Because I'm pissed at it that it works. I mean, that makes no sense. And additionally, I would be surprised if I got letters from people saying that I was actually in favor of homeopathy and trying to prove that it works, and that I was somehow manifesting that as being against it and trying to discredit it. Mm-hmm. That makes no sense. Part of the confusion about you hate God that I hear come up, and it can be frustrating, because sometimes when you're in a dialogue, you will encounter a communication that you know that in any other context but theological context, you would not be having this conversation. And that happens when you use a hypothetical, when you're talking sometimes to theists. And they'll put forward some model of God. I believe in the God of the Bible. And you'll say, well, the God of the Bible was a horrible monster who killed all these people, and the Amalekites, and the laws against homosexuals, and the laws against adultery, and the laws against, and you list all these horrible things, and then they'll say, oh, well, see, you're just angry at God.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you put forward the concept and the model of God, and I was simply adopting that concept in order to say, if this were true, I would have some concerns about this model of God, because this model of God is monstrous. People routinely in dialogues adopt hypotheticals in order to respond to a claim. If someone comes home and they say, I was abducted by aliens. You're not going to initially believe that, and you might be like, calm down, what happened to you? And as they start to explain, you might start trying to find problems to help them realize they weren't really abducted. I don't know what happened to you, but I mean, if you were abducted by aliens, don't you think somebody would have seen? The fact that you go with their claim and start making hypothetical, speculative statements about it doesn't mean that you have adopted the belief.
Well, and actually, this whole idea of taking someone's claim at face value initially is all part of the scientific method. Someone proposes some hypothesis, and we say, okay, if your hypothesis is valid, I would expect to see the following pieces of evidence.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that you've accepted that.
Right.
It's part of the process.
Right. We had an issue with, I think it was Noah's flood, where somebody called us. And I was saying, well, if there was this global flood, I would expect to see a stratolayer where you have all the animals
right.
in the same fossil record, like all the way around the planet at the same level.
Yep.
It's not me saying that I believe it and that we should start digging tomorrow to find this stratolayer.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if people do want to go search for it, but the fact is I'm just putting forward an if-then statement. If your model is correct, then this is what I think about it. We do it all the time. Nobody gets confused and thinks that you believe what you're arguing against. So the fact that it comes up in conversations with theists so often as a point to demonstrate that you actually believe the thing that you are countering, I'm sorry, I can't believe it's an honest statement. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm just going to call
I
it
agree.
disingenuous. It is nobody is that naive. This is a tactic that is so common in conversation and in debate and in dialogues and in daily conversations with anything that you disagree with, that I cannot reasonably give somebody the benefit of the doubt that they are so unfamiliar with this line of response that they would confuse it with adopting the position that you're arguing against. I can't. You're not being honest, or you're not being reasonable for some reason, where outside of this realm you would be. I don't know why it is. I'm not proposing why it is, but that's how I see it, and I don't see a point to wasting time defending something that is so silly that it shouldn't require a defense. And that's part of why I wanted to do the program on this, because I just feel like this needs to be put to bed. Not that I think that this program would put it to bed, but at least I would like to have it out there that this is ridiculous, that theists ask us to respond to such stupidity. And if you are a theist that puts forward this kind of stupidity, you're wasting everyone's time. And I think you're wasting their time personally because you don't want to defend your position, and you would rather throw up something stupid to get the atheist to go over and run after that ball so that you get the pressure off you to have to demonstrate that there's any validity to your claims whatsoever. My theory.
Yeah.
My hypothesis, whatever you want to call it.
I agree. I think attributing motives that are clearly not applicable,
yeah,
and emotions that are not applicable. I think you're going to touch on one of these here in a minute.
Sure.
I think it's a dishonest debate tactic. It's designed to basically divert attention from the fact that no evidence has been presented to support a God claim.
Right. And someone did bring up, they were like, it's such a script. Some of these apologetics are such a script that it's not so much that the person that's saying it understands that they're lying or understands that they're being dishonest.
Yeah.
It may just be like a thoughtless thing where the script comes out and they don't even think about it. And I said, to me, that's sort of like a hairline between you abuse your child or you're criminally neglecting him. It doesn't matter to me. The point is that you're saying something that is so silly that it ought not to be said. And if you would give it a moment's thought, you could save everybody an hour's worth of arguing. So just don't even go there.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that many of the times the theists that present these non-arguments, they're not trying to be deliberately disingenuous, but they have just never thought about it very much, and that's criminal. I mean, you're asserting this is true
in a metaphorical way.
You're basing.
We don't mean that it's truly criminal, that people should not think. I mean, clearly a lot of people would be put away, and there'd be times I'd probably have been cited myself. So.
But no, I mean, it's you've got this set of beliefs that you base your whole life on. You're really betting your whole life on this, and you haven't given it much thought.